Our presenter this evening is Ian Iceton, who is an OU MBA alumni. Ian is Group HR Director at Network Rail and has held a variety of roles in the HR sector. Tonight, Ian will share some of his expertise with us. I will now hand you over to Ian, who will tell you a bit more about his background. Thank you.
Thank you, Janet, and good evening to everybody who is listening to this webinar live. Also, welcome to those people I understand who are listening to it later. It's the first time I've done something like this, so I hope it goes okay. I'm going to talk for about 20 minutes, covering a little bit about myself and my career, as Janet has just mentioned, a little bit about Network Rail, just to give you context, but not too much. And I've got 4 or 5 slides I was going to go through to just use as prompts, but I want to leave plenty of time for questions as well. And it can either be about the things we're talking about or anything more generally, if you would find that useful. I've already seen the questions are coming in from a couple of people, and they're quite wide, so hopefully that will make sense. Let me just click over that. Janet, remind me what I need to do to get the slides going.
Sorry, I forgot to press my talk button. You should see a page explorer box or on the top bar somewhere with an arrow left and right, so you should be able to just click those. Well yes. Done, you found them, great.
So, that's great. So yes, as Janet said, I'm currently at Network Rail. I've been there 4 years. I am a Group HR Director. I'll tell you a little bit more about them in a moment. Before that, I was at Skanska UK, which is a construction company. And before that, I spent a large portion of my career at Volkswagen Group. I was there 17 years. Quite interesting in the sense that I didn't start in HR. I actually began my career in the finance and commercial world and did 8 or 9 years as with operational and line manager responsibilities before switching into HR. So I always say to people, I think I come from HR from a practical business point of view, not from the pink and fluffy end of HR, which is where sometimes people come from. I'm a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Management Accountants from my finance background, and also I'm now a fellow of the CIPD. Also, maybe of interest when we come back to, I'm currently trustee of 3 charities, RSAS, which looks at supporting carers of dementia, chess in schools for children, and the CIPD itself. And yes, Janet said, I did my MBA through the Open University and I did my first degree through City University Business Studies. So hopefully that will be useful. So just moving on, a little bit about Network Rail. We've got 35,000 employees, nearly all based in the UK. We have a couple of people, well, about 20 or 30 internationally, but most in the UK, spread right throughout the country, 70 different offices, but I think most of you will know that the British Railway runs the length and breadth of the country. Some phenomenal statistics in terms of the scale of the infrastructure that we look after. You can see some of the stats there on the page. Probably the 4.5 million passengers a day is the one that keeps us all very focused because it's 4.5 million opportunities every day to disappoint someone or get them late for where they want to get to. And clearly when we get things wrong, it's in the press and in the media quite quickly, so we have to work very hard at that. But probably what people don't realise is we also do a huge amount of freight traffic. So anything from shifting groceries for Tesco to cars for Jaguar Land Rover and everything else that you can imagine. So the scale of the business is phenomenal. And again, if you've got questions that you'd like to come back to on the business in itself, then I'm very happy to cover that later. But in terms of the things that I would sort of use to kick off the conversation this evening, really what I wanted to talk about was some of the challenges facing businesses, and particularly HR functions and line managers regarding employees and employee motivation and engagement. And there's an awful lot of things talked about in terms of this topic, and I guess not much of what I'll cover will necessarily be brand new to all of you, but perhaps I can just give you some of my own personal insights into this topic, and then perhaps as we get into conversation, hopefully it will provoke some interesting thoughts for you, and maybe some ideas that you can take into your own situations. So just as a starting point in terms of some of the things that I think are emerging right now that set the context, we're clearly having a range of employees that are coming out of the current education system, certainly in the UK, and this has got a very UK bias, that are, I think I'll probably use the word suffering from or struggling to get through our UK education system, which has got its failings. And despite whatever level of qualifications they get, they often don't have what I would call many life skills. And perhaps some of you might have experienced some of that in terms of the graduates that we recruit and the younger people that we now recruit need more training and development in how to operate in a work environment than I've seen for a long time. Also, some of them probably have what I would consider unrealistic expectations. Now, they might say that that's just the new world and that it's me that's got things wrong. But some of them expect to run quite quickly. And whilst clearly we want to progress high flyers, sometimes I think there is a mismatch in expectations. I think also what we're seeing is a much greater diversity of people with much more varied expectations and requirements for working patterns. We're getting more international workforce coming into the UK, but we've also got people that are of much greater age range, a much greater range of personal circumstances and personal demands on their own time, particularly time out of work, and that I think drives significantly what it is that they're looking for from a working situation. And certainly what I've seen in the last, I don't know, 5 to 10 years in particular, and I think in a growing trend, is a huge challenge around people being stressed at work. Quite often not necessarily because of work, quite often because of things that are outside of work, things in their home life, but also just quite often in terms of working hours. I think in the UK in particular, we seem to have got into a situation where we have a huge sort of presenteeism expectation and in a lot of commercial pressure for people to work longer and longer hours, and it isn't necessarily smart working, and I think that brings a phenomenal challenge for us. And in particular, certainly we've seen it in our business, but I think we've seen it in others as well, a lot more older people that are either wanting to or actually just having to stay into the workforce later, and they may have different requirements, certainly have different requirements in terms of what they're looking for, and you know, that's changed environment compared to how things might have been previously. And I think as line managers, as HR teams, and as executives and businesses, I think all of that creates an environment which makes thinking about how you motivate people and reward people more challenging. So then looking specifically at a couple of other environmental factors, things that are happening that I think are very specific, but perhaps bringing this topic into even sharper relief. The changes in pension rules, obviously there's been a lot in the UK in the last few years, but I think the one that's, well, probably two things that I think are causing the most level of interest for me is the limit on the amount of lifetime earnings that people can accrue. Certainly in this last change, the ones that have taken effect in April this year, has had a significant impact in terms of a large number of people now reaching the point where they actually get no further benefit from being inside our company pension scheme, and that certainly means that a benefit that was once considered the gold-plated part of what you would offer employees, actually for a growing proportion of senior people and significant people is not the motivator it once was. We've also got a lot of people, and I use the phrase middle-aged in a very sort of general sense, but a lot of people in our workforce that have got child or people care issues at both ends of their life. They might still have children at home that have requirements, but they might have aging parents that have requirements as well. And that's a growing trend and causing issues and making us have to think very carefully about how we support those people, formally and informally, in their working lives. The introduction of the apprentice levy which obviously has caused a lot of controversy and is hitting businesses very soon, I think will bring an extra challenge to specifically how we use apprentices, but just training generally, I think will be affected by the drive, obviously somewhat driven politically, but to get a large number of people through the apprentice route, and sometimes that can have distorting impacts on other parts of how you recruit people and how you train people. I mean, I'm a passionate believer in apprenticeships and development for early entrants, but you have to be really conscious of what some of these changes might have on the way you operate schemes. And then in particular, we have a number of skill gaps, as I'm sure you will have in other businesses and other sectors that you work in. But for us, there are certain types of project management, construction skills, certainly electrical and electronic engineering skills, but engineering generally. The UK is going through a resurgence of investments in infrastructure, and it's not just the transport sector, but the power sector. A lot of the utility companies are all trying to recruit the similar kind of people, and there is just, as a country, we just haven't developed enough people to cover all of the opportunities that we now have, and that brings challenges. And we know sometimes that creates opportunities for employees to their advantage, but sometimes not always to ours as employers. So thinking around that, we've also got to think about, do we have to handle people in different ways? Do we have to put packages together? Do we have to manage them? Do we have to motivate them in different ways? And certainly some of the things that I've been thinking about recently is, when we're recruiting people, what proposition are we proposing to employees? Should we expect them to stay loyal to us as a business for a long period of time? We have in our business a phenomenal average length of service. It's probably about 20 years average length of service, and we have people that have 40 or 50 years working in the business, so massively loyal. But do I expect the people that are joining now in their 20s to have the same working pattern? Perhaps not, and therefore, you know, some of the things that we did over the last 20 years may need to be different for the people that are joining us now. I use one specific example, partly because I'm biased, having worked in both the car industry and the rail industry, but many businesses that I've worked in provide company cars, or at least car allowances. But with the way the company car taxation has changed over the last 10 years, certainly the way the UK congestion of roads has got much worse, and certainly obviously now that I'm trying to promote people using the train, I would argue our company cars just create more hassle than they're worth, and the responsibilities and liabilities for an employer that have company car schemes just may not be that worthwhile going forward. Similarly, and this is a huge challenge for me because I am a passionate believer in pensions and pension schemes. I've been a trustee pension schemes in the last 3 businesses that I've worked in. I'm currently chairman of the Network Rail pension scheme, so I believe it's really important for individuals to make pension provision and not rely on state benefits. But as I said earlier, there are real challenges. At the top end of the schemes and of ages and longevity, we're now getting people that are maxed out, and therefore it's not really a motivator for them. And at the other end of the spectrum, with the opening up of requirements around lifetime ISAs and other savings opportunities, there's a real opportunity for younger people to consider, well, what is the best way for them to provide for their future? And as pensions are clearly hugely expensive and bring some risks for an employer, then we could argue, well, is that a sensible thing for us to continue to offer, or is it something that we should look to minimise and use our resources in other ways? So, if we're not going to do some of the things that we've done before, then perhaps we can look at some other things. And I've sort of called this slide, which is my final slide before we open it out a bit more generally, why not provide for staff some of the following? And I mean, some or all of these things you might already be doing, but as I said at the start, they are perhaps thought provokers. So what about financial experience? You know, financial education. I've done it in other businesses where you can actually provide people an opportunity, not necessarily through the company, but through there are external providers who free of charge will provide service to your employees to give them general, independent financial advice. And that has been extremely well received at different times in the past. And again, one of the things that we're spending a lot of time doing now is providing information to support people with things like stress and how they cope with it. And that sometimes, as I said earlier, it might be things that are outside of their working life, but because it has such an impact on their working life, to be able to give them the opportunity to speak to independent counselling and get support outside of work, it's now perceived as a huge benefit. And the last time we checked the statistics, we were amazed in our business at how many people are taking up the opportunity of those provisions. And it is not that expensive to provide if you choose the right provider. Another thing that's obviously been talked about a lot in the media is about flexible working and providing sensible working hours. And there's been a lot of talk, but a lot of organisations struggle to understand how to cope with that. Well, I think we're going to have to get even better at that going forward, and certainly something we're looking at. And we're trying to develop that into giving people more opportunities within their career, being much more agile about job swaps, projects, secondments, training, so that even if we think that we might be training people up to put them in a situation where they might be in a better place to eventually go and work for somebody else, the thought that we are providing that development and that training is obviously something that motivates them to stay. And I did a straw poll of about 40 or 50 of our own graduates over the last couple of days in preparation for this webinar, and I asked them what it was that were the things that really helped them, really motivated them to stay working for us. And that whole topic of development and what opportunities they saw and being able to be involved in exciting projects far outweighed the things they said about pay and bonus and other things. Clearly, flexibility around holiday allowance also falls into that category. And something that we are working very hard at is to understand which benefits can be provided via salary sacrifice. Now, clearly, the government, I know, is looking at trying to reduce what's available, but whilst it's available, not just cars, but bikes, but childcare benefits, but a whole raft of things can be done through salary sacrifice. And if you do that through a flexible benefits opportunity as well, where you give people the opportunity to buy and sell benefits, you really start to tailor things to help individuals. So those are just a start of a 10 in terms of some of the things that I've been looking at and we're starting to look at in terms of our business. I think, therefore, in summary, I'd say I think the world is changing. I think the challenges on employees are greater than ever. Their opportunities are probably greater than ever. Their worries are greater than ever. And I think for line managers, HR functions, and for executives generally thinking about how to keep them motivated and keep them rewarded, I think it's a very challenging time, but one that, for people to get it right, allows you to stand out and be a differentiator. So I will probably stop at this point and give people an opportunity for questions.
Thank you very much, Ian. That's very interesting. Actually, I'd just like to make a comment before we start the questions. Seeing your point on the financial education and some providers having free services, the Open University actually has a free MOOC, a massive online course, which is all about personal finance. So what I will do, if anybody's interested, when I send out the recording, I'll send a link to it, and then everybody can go and have a look at that if they want to, because it's a really useful course and they might enjoy it. So, okay.
It's very, very topical. Thank you.
So, very useful tool. And, yeah, we welcome as many people on it, and it's totally free. So, always good. I would like, I'll read out the questions that we were sent earlier, and then there is another question come in. So if you'll just bear with me. What would be Ian's advice to women who wish to return into the workforce in a part-time capacity? This is quite common after being family focused after having kids, and in this person's case, choosing not to work the past decade.
Thank you. So the question is about returning to work, being out of work for a period of time, looking to come back part-time. I think all of those things are things that more and more women are looking to try and do. as I said earlier, I think it's just another aspect of the sort of growing requirement for employers to be more creative and more flexible. And hopefully the better employers will be able to accommodate people that want to come back into terms of those working patterns. Certainly in people that work for me and in our business, we welcome people back, and we would certainly encourage people that are looking to get back to apply for roles and be really open about considering them. I think from an individual point of view, the longer they've been away from work, I know the more daunting it is, and the more sort of difficult it is to contemplate. So if people can try and get in touch with businesses or with organisations, certainly if they're returning to one they know, that helps. If they're applying for new jobs, then it's trying to perhaps make the contacts with people, perhaps have informal chats with people before actually getting into a sort of an interview situation, so that you can build up confidence, because I know that's probably one of the most difficult things, is often the perception that the world has moved on when you've been doing other things, and usually it's nowhere near has moved on as much as people think, and it's just a question of giving yourself the confidence to get back into that working environment.
I like that. Actually, I had the world move on when I had my children many, many moons ago, and I used to work as a cartographer, and in my time away having the children, by the time I came back, we'd gone over to using computers, so I did have to change careers. Yes. But I got some training, and I did. Anyway, the other question is, my question would centre around blended or hybrid organisational culture. What new rules are required to maintain high performance in teams spread across the globe in the 21st century? Unified or common values will probably remain a strong prerequisite. What else? That was a mouthful.
Yeah, that's a really good question, a really difficult one to answer. So in terms of the challenge around international business, and particularly people that are working in international teams, certainly not so much in Network Rail. In my two previous organisations, I worked in international businesses. Skanska was in about 15 countries. Volkswagen was in about 100 countries. My experience from both of those is that even if you are remote most of the time, it's really important to find some really good quality opportunities to get to know people. So even if it's only once a year or a bit more frequent than that, but when people are physically together, to really get to know them and spend quality time. I think between times, it's having good dialogue, and I always, whether it's in the UK or internationally, I would always say speak to people on the telephone rather than the blasted email if you can avoid it, because you learn so much more, and particularly when you're talking with people not in first languages, the nuances of a conversation are really important. So yeah, building good teams, building good understanding of cultures, and finding opportunities to do things together, I think are really, really powerful. And if people are interested in that particular piece of environment, I think there's some absolutely amazing stuff that was done by Hofstede, which actually we covered in the MBA through the OU. But if you haven't read it, he's done a number of good books, but it talks a lot about the different types of cultures internationally, and I found it extremely valuable in real life as well as in studying.
Thank you very much, Ian. We have another question. Do you know which engagement activities are most effective, and what are they? Gosh, that's a good question. I think that I would probably say that I don't think I do know. I think my proposition is that I think things are changing. I think historically there was a lot of evidence that certain traditional things, pay, bonus, pensions, cars, were all big ticks. I think as the workforce is becoming more diverse, I think the reality is that my answer to the question is actually there is no one thing that now is the right size for everyone. I think that the thing that's going to be most effective is being flexible enough to provide different answers and different support for different people. And as I say, some of it may not even be perceived as a traditional employee motivation or rewards tool. As I say, for us, one of the things that's probably most powerful at the moment is the support we provide independently by the caring and counselling organisation for people that have got troubles outside of work. And for a large proportion of our people, that's probably the
perceived at the moment to be one of the strongest benefits.
Thank you, Ian. Yes, we're very lucky at the OU. We've got a similar thing, and it is good to know you've got that safety net in the background, so that's rather nice. We have another question. How do the changes you are proposing reflect the fact that many organisations are changing a lot faster than 20 or 40 years ago? Yes, they really are changing fast, aren't they? Thank you.
Yes, they really are changing, and I think that's an important part of what I'm trying to say, which is I actually think you have to be really careful not to continue to apply rules and techniques and styles of management, in particular around engagement and motivation, that were appropriate 40 years ago or even 20 years ago or even 10 years ago, because I think things are changing. And I think the smart thing for people to do is to be very open-minded and very flexible. And I saw one of the other questions that's coming in a minute is around diversity, and I think that's also an important factor of it, which is to not think what you would want as an individual, but be conscious that actually there are lots of different groups with lots of different requirements, and having really good understanding of what people want. So for us, we asked the question as part of our annual staff survey, which is, what would make working for us better? And it's always worth the time to invest in, to read those answers and to really see what motivates people, because it is much more diverse than it ever was before.
So it's a little bit about empathy then, is it?
I think empathy is one way of putting it. I think it's been flexible. I think it's been agile. I think it's been prepared to be a bit creative and not sort of, as I said, not assume that one size fits all, because I think we're in a very, very diverse situation now.
Thank you. We have another one. This is quite a probing one. Do you hire MBA graduates? And if so, what characteristics are you looking at? How do you motivate them to grow within the company? That's a good one.
Very good question. I can't think why people are asking that one. Yes, we do. We do hire MBAs. We recruit a lot of people into various programs. We recruit at undergraduate level, we recruit at graduate level, we recruit people on specialist engineering positions, because obviously we're an engineering business, but about half of our graduates are general management population, and there's a huge raft of opportunities for smart people, well-educated people to come into our business. In terms of what we're looking for, it's people that can contribute to what we're doing, have got a really positive attitude, have the interpersonal skills to convert that knowledge and education in an effective way in a big, complex people business, and the people have got a passion for wanting to make the business better and to make those 4.5 million passengers every day have a better service. So any of those things, and if people are interested, you can go on to the Network Rail website, and we have all our opportunities listed all of the time.
You may be inundated tomorrow, Ian. Okay, next question. Could you comment on the idea of having an overtime and holiday account, which you could save up days and hours, which can be subtracted from your final year of work, so that you can finish working earlier by a few months yet still be employed? And it goes on to say, do you have any comments on blended learning? But I'm not sure if that's a separate part of the question.
Well, we'll take them, I think they're very separate, so we'll take them separately. So the first bit, we already do partly what's asked in the question, which is people do have an opportunity to bank time. So we have different schemes for different parts of the business, but people can firstly buy and sell a number of days holiday on top of their basic allowance for every given year, so that there's a flexible up and down. But they can also bank time, so that over a number of years they can build up an accrued amount, and they don't have to wait actually till they reach the end of their career. They can choose to take it if they want a sabbatical or something like that. People often bank up something and maybe take somewhere between 1 and 3 months off because they want to go to Australia or something like that. So in principle, I think all of those things are good ideas, and I would say, not just from an employer's point of view, but from an employee's point of view, I would say don't leave it just to the end of a career, because actually the employer gets no benefit at the end of that. I would say give people a chance to do it early, because they come back refreshed and they come back even more motivated to do a great job for you because you provided them that opportunity. So find a way to allow them to do it earlier.
Thank you, Ian.
Somebody... about blended learning.
Yes.
I'm a passionate believer in blended learning. We've moved, both in my current business and in my previous business, to a much more blended learning approach and a much more flexible learning and teaching and training process than, again, was historical, where it was just pure traditional classroom based, because people are different and they have different requirements, but also it's much better when you can integrate it into people's real jobs and make it relevant rather than too abstract. So we do everything we can to make it as interactive as possible.
Thank you, Ian. And going back to talking about the assistance programs, there's somebody here who has said that their public sector employer subscribed to an employee assistance program, which can be used for work or personal matters, for
Yes.
families, and covers health, legal advice, and seems to be well used. So
that's exactly what we do as well.
Yeah, that's excellent. And I think you answered the question about diversity earlier on. So I
sort of touched on it, but if we've got time, I wouldn't mind broadening it out.
Yes, we've got plenty of time. Yes.
Yeah, I think the question was probably broader than.
Yes, it was. How do you encourage diversity at Network Rail?
So we are also very passionate about this, and we do a lot in this space. When I started in the business 4 years ago, we didn't have a very good reputation for diversity. It's traditionally the rail industry has been very white, male, middle-aged, and very, very monoculture, and we've really been trying to change it a lot. And we've done a lot of things. So we have been very active in promoting our diversity strategy, so that everybody inside and outside the business knows that we're serious about this. We have pushed really hard to create staff networks within the business, and we have 6 so far, and we have over 1,000 employees that are part of one of the staff networks, and these are self-managed, self-motivated groups that take particular issues, whether it be promoting women at work, or ethnicity, or religion, or disability, and they organise things within their own groups to give support to each other, and that is extremely popular. We also work very hard to meet much more than our legal minimum requirements in terms of diversity impact assessments and other requirements, so that people can see us as a role model in terms of setting a disability and diversity agenda. So we have something called the Built Environment Access Panel, which I'm very proud of. We have about 10 or 12 people who come from a whole range of different situations. Some of them are blind, some of them are deaf, some of them are in wheelchairs, and when we're looking at a physical redesign of a station or a platform or a new project, they all go and have a look at the designs and ideally go and see the project being under construction, and they give us fantastic advice of things that we've not thought about. So, for example, we've just recently reopened Birmingham New Street Station, which is a massive rebuild, and if anyone's been through Birmingham New Street, they'll know what a huge improvement to the station it is. But when our Built Environment Access Panel looked at it, our blind advisor informed us that it was such a big indoor space that actually their guide dog didn't have anywhere to go to the toilet, and it was too far then to go outside. So we've now got an indoor doggy loo, so that blind passengers have somewhere that their dogs don't have to go outside for. And it was things like that that really promote how serious we are about thinking about the wider impact of diversity on the community and on our passengers.
I think that's great. That's wonderful. Thank you, Ian. Lovely. We have another one. Thank you for talking this evening. Leadership at every level is really important in delivering the aspects you have talked about. What leadership specific training does Network Rail provide to ensure engagement is maximised? Are there local issues that prevent Network Rail proving aspects such as flexi working? I think that might be approving. Yeah.
Yes. So yes, there's a couple of parts to that, and the short answer is yes to all of them. So the first bit in terms of leadership, yes, we work very hard because as people get more responsibilities and certainly get more team responsibilities, They can often be promoted because they're technical experts, but they aren't necessarily naturals, the people side of things and the leadership side of things. So we do provide a lot of additional support, but we want people to be great people managers, not just great technical managers. And that's often around a combination of both practical skills of being a manager, but also giving them the confidence to do whatever they need to do to be a great manager. We have an online and telephone helpline that for all managers, so if they have any particular issues, they've got someone that they can ring up and talk to and get advice for. Often that's when they start to get into legal or employee issues, but it can be broader than that. But we also have a series of staggered leadership, management and leadership programs that people progress through their career to give them a broader and broader experience. And we try and make that so that they, because we're a big business, we also get to know the rest of the business and also the rest of the industry, so that they're constantly raising their perspective in terms of how to operate. It's always a challenge. Not everybody's a natural at it, and there's always things that are going wrong, so you do have to work hard at it. Specifically, when we do the annual employee survey, we ask all managers to produce an action plan, having looked at the results of their employee survey and what it is that people in their local team have said that they could do better in, and that is very tangible for every manager to be able to work on, and we do try and push them really hard on that, and it's part of our corporate scorecard that every manager has got an action plan from their employee engagement survey and that they're doing something about it, and we monitor that. Are there local issues sometimes that mean that things are more challenging? Yes, there are. We have some particular challenges, which is as the rail industry has become much more used and much more popular. In the last 15 years, we've doubled the amount of people travelling on the UK railway. The length of time that trains are running has got longer, and therefore that means the amount of time when we've got downtime where we can maintain the railways that need repairing or enhancing it or new projects has get shrunk and shrunk and shrunk. So a lot of our staff work in the evenings, a lot of them have to work at weekends, and particularly at bank holidays when we need perhaps 2 or 3 days of having a good run at something to be able to do something more technical. And that brings challenges. So for example, on Christmas Day last year, we had 20,000 employees working during Christmas Day, and inevitably that has massive impact on their personal lives, and we have to adapt to that in ways that many other businesses don't necessarily need to deal with. So that always brings challenges from a management point of view.
That's amazing, Ian. I never realised there were so many people working away on Christmas Day when I'm enjoying my turkey.
I know. Well, I think other than the National Health Service, we probably had more people working on Christmas Day than any other business.
That's amazing. Right. Okay, we've got another question here. Most of the organisations prefer to hire people who have experience in competitor firms. What if somebody wants to change industry and move into a different role? Could you please recommend a strategy on how to get through with job application, perhaps with CV fine-tuning or perhaps cold calling?
Yes, so well, I've changed industry 3 times, so it is possible. I think the way to do it is to make sure that whether it be a CV or in an interview, that you don't focus on the industry aspects of the experience, but focus on the functional aspects of your experience that makes it a transferable skill. So have a real good think about what it is that the organisation you're talking to or looking to apply to does, and think about, well, how can I convert my skills? So I've got obviously a mixture of finance skills and HR skills, and my argument is that they're applicable in most, if not all, industries. So when you go for a job, find a way to highlight the advantage of that, and when you're asked a question, try and give a practical answer that isn't a theoretical answer to say, I did this or I've done this in my current or my past jobs, and I think this would be directly applicable to this situation because I think these things are similar. And I think that's a great way to transition across. And about cold calling, I'm not so sure about absolute cold calling. I hear it does work, but I've never done it myself. But I certainly think in terms of, if you look at the number of job boards that currently advertise positions, there are, thousands and thousands of jobs out there. So it's not that there aren't opportunities. It's doing the research and finding out a bit about the organisation to say, well, actually, which are the ones that look like that I could really make that link and really convert my current experience to something that they would find useful. And I think it's attitude and approach and passion and enthusiasm counts for a lot. So don't worry if it's not in the same industry that you're currently in.
Thank you, Ian. There's another question in. How is your HR department structured? Do you have centres of excellence and also outsourced business services?
Yes. In short, we do follow the, I suppose, what has become quite typical, which is the so-called Ulrich model of having sort of a three-pronged approach to it. So we have a number of shared services that are run in literally in a shared service type environment. And one of the ones that I talked about was the telephone hotline for managers, which is all done from one outsourced operation, but we work very closely with them. We also do have a payroll, employee admin type shared service as well. But secondly, we have a whole bunch of centres of expertise who sit with me in the headquarters in Milton Keynes, and they're based around the traditional technical functions, so that be pensions, training, recruitment, industrial relations, employee relations, diversity, and they have small teams that provide the policy and guidance structure. And then by far the biggest part of my team is the devolved business partners. And we have a big HR team, because obviously we've got 35,000 employees, you'd expect that. But we've got nearly 200 business partners who are devolved. They actually sit in the business, they don't sit in the headquarters. And in fact, in the reporting charts, the org charts, they don't actually report to me formally, they report into the local managing directors and local leaders of the business, but they have a dotted, strong functional line to me. But those 200 business partners are geographically based across the country, and they're the front line of HR, and they provide support to local businesses. And obviously what we try and do is make sure that the three parts of the Ulrich model pull together in an effective way. One of the interesting things we're doing at the moment is just reviewing all of that and making sure with such a diverse business across such a wide range of the UK, how we make sure that things that are done in the centre are not too remote from the local businesses, and making sure that those devolved business partners have a real strong voice in how we do things.
Thank you, Ian. You sort of touched on this question earlier, but I think I'm not sure. Do you have in-house trainers or externals who come in?
We do both. We probably have more in-house trainers than external. That's partly a function of the fact that there are quite a lot of technical and vocational courses that we run. So we did last year, let me just get the figures right, I think we did 80,000 training days, which is quite a large number, and a significant proportion, probably 3/4, are for frontline staff, maintenance staff and operational staff. And really the only people that can give them the kind of training that they have, which might be around welding or replacing ballast or electrical electronic engineering, typical people that have done the jobs previously and have been taught to become trainers. So that 3/4 of the business we have to more or less grow our own. But when we get more into generalist skills, management skills and leadership skills, then we do buy some stuff in. But we always try and blend senior people from within the business as well, because it makes it ensure that it's more relevant and engaged and engaging by having people ourselves. But we have 9 regional training centres around the country, and we do a lot of training through those and run them almost as a mini business in itself.
Thank you, Ian. I think there's a lot of questions that are sort of geared with, maybe I'd like to work at Network Rail. We've got one more, which I'll make probably the last because we've just gone over time, but okay. If everyone's okay. Unless we are all working for the same organisation, questions appear to suggest a lot of companies have adopted similar approaches. Is this convergence a good thing? And that's an interesting one, yes. Is there a USP, I guess? Yes.
Well, I think the argument, I doubt whether all businesses have converged. I suspect that there might be more a question of the people that are our audience tonight are more likely to be either as individuals or working for organisations that are perhaps a little bit more enlightened, potentially. I suspect across the whole range of the economy, and certainly there are lots of organisations that I don't think necessarily doing all the same things. But then again, people do talk more. There's a lot more available, as you say, on the internet, and also a lot of organisations that are prepared to share best practice in a way that perhaps previously would have been seen as a competitive thing, but whereas now people just want for things to work in the best possible way. So there are a lot of free providers. So I think that does help the things that are the best things to do to get around. And very quickly, if organisations are seen to not be doing very well, I think it counts against them. So organisations do need to be fast and agile and look at what the good people are doing.
Thank you very much, Ian. Okay, so I think we'll leave it there. Thank you so much for that really, really interesting talk and really, really engaging Q&A session at the end. I just say to everybody that there are lots of services online for alumni, and when I send the recording out, I'll put some links to various bits and pieces. And all I can say now is thank you all for attending, and see you again next time. Good night.
Good night.